Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief at R&R, and today we're diving into an exciting initiative that could reshape higher education and the restoration industry. Our special guest is Dr. Jacob Vila, associate professor at Middle Tennessee State University, with over 20 years of experience in construction and disaster restoration. Now, Dr. Vila is spearheading efforts to launch a groundbreaking degree program specifically for the restoration industry, modeled after MTSU's successful concrete industry management program. Please welcome Dr. Jacob Vila.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, I have a couple of questions for you. Very light. I would like people to get to know you and your initiative on this. So, first question that I have is probably a standard one that everybody is asking. How did you get started in the restoration industry?
So my family has a restoration business in Southern California. My dad worked in the industry for like through the 80s, working for a contractor in Orange County, California. And then 1990, he started our family restoration business, CA Construction, out of Riverside, California. And so I was a kid at the time. So as a kid, I grew up working in it. So I was always around job sites with my dad. And then when they started the business, it was in the downstairs bedroom of our house. And so, I saw everything from, and we had fax machines back then when losses would come in. So I saw the fax machine come in or doing its work. And my mom worked with him in the business. And then they a few years after that they got like an office building. And so if I wasn't at school or playing sports or at home, we would be at the office building. And then growing up, it ended up being a natural fit. I really enjoyed the industry. I enjoyed the work that we did. And so through college, in grad school, I worked in the family business, and I worked in it it was about just over 17 years. I'll say 17 years of my adult life, right? So if you count child labor and all of that, it was probably well over 20 years. But I wore a lot of different hats. So I worked in with emergency crews and mitigation. Did a lot of board ups, temporary shoring, after fires or cars driving into buildings. Worked in estimating, sales, business development, general management. Did a lot with the TPAs. Started working in Xactimate when it was the DOS version. So I've been able to see the
Evolve with it, huh?
operations of Xactimate. Um, yeah, and what's funny, when Xactimate first started, I remember, sorry, this is getting us a little sidetracked, but I remember my dad, he would write scopes. So he'd go out and he would use the yellow Lego pads, and he'd write his scope notes, and then he'd come into the office, and then he had someone in the office that would take his notes and then using a typewriter would like type stuff up for his estimate, and they had a price list. And then Xactimate came on scene, and I remember my dad coming in one night, and he was talking to my mom, and he said, this program, it's going to change the industry. It's going to change how we do all the things that we do. And I mean, he couldn't have been more right. So my dad was one of the early adopters of Xactimate, and so probably a little more background than you thought you were going to get with that, but
I actually think it kind of feeds into all what we're talking about, right? The need for education, right? Like
uh,
you have to be able to see kind of into the future or what will make a difference for not just our generation, but future generations. I think that's extremely important. And Xactimate, I mean, starting, DOS version, now it's like mobile and like there's the cloud and like, all of these things. And we've got Symbility and everything like that. So I think that that's truly kind of an insight of where you get your passion from and what has driven you to create a program like this, right? So you've been in the industry for 20 plus years. What made you start noticing that there was a need for a program specifically like this?
yeah. So, when when I got into teaching, so as a faculty member, we conduct research, right? And so with research, we're doing studies, we're publishing articles, and that's part of what we do when we're not in the classroom. And so I made the decision when I started teaching that I wanted to make sure that anything that I did research wise or writing wise was going to have relevance to like just practical relevance, right? You're going to hear a frustration that I have with academia right now. So just full disclosure. One of the challenges that I think, we see in higher ed and in academia in particular is when you have researchers that, they'll conduct a study, they'll publish their work, and it's quite often it's really good work. But what sometimes happens is that it just ends up becoming a conversation amongst academics, right? And it doesn't always venture beyond that. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever I did in academia had practical application for what practitioners were doing. And so there's this idea of having practice informed theory and theory informed practice. And so I really wanted that to be central to the work. And I wanted my work to be focused on the restoration industry. And so what I did is I took on some studies. So our first study, we looked at family business dynamics in the restoration industry. That idea came from focus groups that we held with restoration contractors. So we'd get together with contractor groups, and I said, hey, what is it that you guys want to know about? What's going to make you excited? So the first one was family business dynamics in the restoration industry. So I became a family business expert. So I read all the books on family business, talked to all the leading experts in family business, read all of their research, and just try to consume as much as I could just to understand what goes on within family businesses. And then we did our family business study using a very tested instrument. It's called the FPEC scale, and it was developed by a team, but particularly a guy named Joe Astrachan years ago. And so we used his instrument. And whenever you do a study like this, there's also costs associated with it, right? So someone I can't thank enough is Les Cunningham and Business Networks, because every time we've had a study, there's always costs associated with it, right? So there's costs associated with developing the study, the instrumentation. So when we use a tool like the FPEC scale, it's not something that we can use free. There's a fee associated with every license that's tied to it. And so Les and Business Networks, his whole team and his contractors, anytime we've had a need for resources, they've always written the check for that. So I can't thank them enough. And I think if anyone in the industry has appreciated any of the research that we've done, please tip your hat to Les and Business Networks, because we couldn't have done it without them. So we had our family business study. After that, we looked at, again, we had focus groups, and we looked at employee burnout in the restoration industry. So I became a burnout expert, read all the books on burnout, read all the research. And we used Maslach's burnout inventory, the MBI and AWS. I won't get too much in the weeds with all that, but so those are just highly tested, reliable instruments. We use those. And then from there, we learned that estimators were particularly burned out. So we had some spin-off articles on estimator burnout. And so that's kind of been the sequence. And every time we've done a study like that, I've made a point of making it to industry conferences, making it to more focus groups, and then sharing the results of our study. So I publish it in academic articles. And then after that, we partner with you guys, which you guys have been fantastic. And I can't thank you all enough. Because you help distribute. So we kind of repackage the material, because to be candid, academic articles are just really boring to read. They're not a lot of fun to write, and they're just very boring to read. It's not like something you want to sit down by the fire on a Friday night and just like it's my
dive into it, right? And just
so we repackage it, and you guys help us distribute a lot of that. And so again, we can't thank you all enough for that.
Well, I was going to say, just leading on to that, like, this program is being built. It's not something that you're just like, hey, I want to do this. Like, the time and effort that you've put into this is like, you're thinking of avenues, or being brought avenues that matter for this industry, for really everybody, to be completely honest, even up to the franchise level.
Yeah. And it's, and the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive, right? And this idea, it's not an idea that I came up with specifically. I mean, after these focus groups and after I share the results of our studies with industry, the feedback every time we've done the study, whether it's been family business burnout or estimator burnout, the feedback I've gotten from industry every time has been, hey, thank you for taking on this work. We appreciate what you're finding. We appreciate that you're sharing it with us. But what can you do to help us get more people into the industry, get more young people into the industry? And so within my sphere of influence and what I have control over, like this is an idea that was born from all of those conversations. So this hasn't been really my idea. It's been something that we partnered with the industry on and said, hey, it makes sense to have a degree concentration in restoration. I think the industry is ripe for it. And I think I mean, there's a few layers to this. I think there's a lot more that the industry can do as a whole to reach young people, right? I don't think
Yeah.
as an industry we've done a great job of reaching young people. I think there's more we can do to reach high schoolers, community college students, university students, grad students. And when I say grad, I mean there's MBAs, and the industry is maturing in a way where I mean there's needs at every level. And my understanding is we're not doing a good enough job filling those needs at every level. And just to speak to, what the industry could do more, and I've used this example in my last few talks with the industry, but we have a career fair here at MTSU every year. And we have over 175 employers that come to MTSU looking for our concrete and construction management students. And it's something that we publicize widely and we invite everyone to come. Of the 175, how many do you think are restoration contractors?
Maybe two, three.
There's one.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so the point I try to make to industry as well is, if you want to start putting a dent in your recruiting efforts and bringing on people, you got to show up to the table because all those other 175 employers are walking away with hires, right? And right now, our school has grown significantly. So our school here at MTSU, the School of Concrete and Construction Management, our enrollment coming in this fall is over 500 students. We've had double-digit growth. I mean, I want to speak conservatively, but I know for a fact, like the last 2 to 3 years. So we're one of the fastest growing programs on campus, and we don't see the growth, at least in the near future, slowing down at all. So got more students, more people interested in this type of stuff, and I think and that could be the case in other parts of the country. So I think restoration contractors could start doing more in terms of engaging colleges and universities in that manner.
Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier when we were talking. Just I don't know if it's all generations. I'm on the higher end of the millennials. But I feel like a lot of the younger generations, they don't necessarily want to go for their bachelor's, their MBA, their doctorate. And I feel like this is one of those things that in restoration, you're all in or you're not. And I feel like if you're preparing these people that are going to be professionals and you're giving them everything and you're almost placing them right at the end of the day with the career fair, what is better than that? Because most people stumble upon our industry and or you get people that come and try it and then they leave. So then the franchise or the business is starting that hire process all over. And it's costing them more in trying to find a good, reliable employee than possibly even putting them through a program, right? I think that's extremely important. And the concept of this is just so amazing. And I think you touched on one of the other things I was curious about was, what and why were you motivated for this particular program? But I think you really hit it already. Just you saw the need based on what you're getting back from the studies you guys are doing. And, COVID really did put a damper on a lot of stuff. And I really feel like one of the biggest things was our industry. There was burnout, like you said. I'm interested in that in the study that you did. Was it pre or post COVID?
So that I'm trying to think. Our data set was pre, yeah, it was pre-COVID, And all the normative data was obviously pre-COVID data. And so actually, Les and Leighton and I were talking in Vegas for the experience. And one of
Mhm.
the things we talked about, it'd be interesting once that instrument has its post-COVID normative data. It would be really interesting to do to replicate that exact same study now with the new normative data. It'd be really fascinating to see what that would look like.
Yeah, I think it would really be eye-opening too on either side of the spectrum, right? Like
Yeah.
to be able, and that's why I was asking if it was pre or post COVID because burnout was a thing prior to COVID.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody can relate, but then COVID hit and there was just such a need for our industry, especially the cleaning portion of our industry. And, there were still disasters, there was still restoration and rebuild happening, and it didn't stop. So when that happens, please let me know. I would love
Yeah.
to know what the
Absolutely.
data says.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely be reaching out to you because you guys have been so helpful in getting everything out. So
I think that's huge. I think that could also pair with like emergency management, right? Like if you're already suffering from burnout, when there's an emergency, like this is how you can
yeah.
maybe navigate that a little better.
Right.
Um, so with this particular program, can you give a little details of what you're wanting it to be? For example, like is it months, years of time? What does it all entail?
Yeah. So it's a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management. And then we have here at our school, we have concentrations, right? So we have a Bachelor of Science in Concrete Industry Management with the concentration in concrete contracting and then production sales and service. So the concrete program, one bachelor's degree, but then two concentration options. Right now, for our construction management program, it's a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management, and there's two concentration options right now. There's commercial construction, and then there's land development and residential building. And so this would be a third concentration within the Bachelor of Science of Construction Management. And so that's where it would fall in terms of a degree or program. And then the curriculum, we've had focus groups where we've talked with industry stakeholders to narrow down a curriculum. And so right now, the first class would be like an introductory class to restoration. So they'd learn about all the industry certifications, the basic science of restoration. We would also teach them the fundamentals of operations management and just what goes on in a restoration business. And who are the key stakeholders within the industry. So that would kind of give them the context for the industry. Then we would have the second class will be an estimating class in EMS and mitigation estimating. Then they'd have another estimating class in structural and catastrophe estimating. And then they'd have a project management class. They'd have a required internship. So all of our students are required to do internships. So it wouldn't be any different for our restoration students. So they would have to intern with restoration contractors. And then the last class would be a capstone class where they work on an industry related problem, or they could also take on like a research project or something like that related to restoration.
That is so cool. I think this is not only developed for the success of anybody who were to potentially go through the program. I think it's really thought out. And I think with you being in the industry for 20 years, wouldn't you have learned so much if there was something in place like that, 20 years ago, 10 years ago? I'm sure you would probably change a lot of things that you have done in your career. Um, but you mentioned internship. So do you guys intern with the companies that come to the career fair? So it's almost kind of like they're able to see them go through the program and then they really interview them to bring them on full time, essentially.
Yes, yes. So they hire interns, but they also hire full time, right? And then we have some students that have job offers and contracts in hand a year before they graduate. And then and something, so we had a restoration industry conference last year here at MTSU in November. We're going to have our second one this November. So if anyone's interested in that, reach out to Business Networks, Les Cunningham. So November 6th through the 9th, we're going to have our second restoration industry conference. And one of the amazing things is through the interactions we saw last year and then students anticipating it this year, students participate in the whole conference. So restoration contractors who do come, are interacting with students. They're seeing our campus, they're seeing our facilities. And one of the key takeaways we had after last year is it's not a tough sell to sell the industry to young aspiring candidates. Once they interact with our restoration contractors and once they learn about the industry, they get really, really excited. And that's been amazing to see because that in fact every student that interacted with our group last year pursued an internship and or is now working in restoration in some capacity. And so, I mean, it was a huge success. And so I think if we can, as an industry, replicate that and then also send our best people to go talk to young people. I think that
Yeah,
that is a challenge, right? So
that
you
makes a
want to send
difference.
somebody who's relatable, likable, and while I think with any industry, there's always seasons where, work gets tough or work gets old or all those different things. But I think if we have people engaging young people who, I mean, really have a firm grounding in the industry, know why they're doing it, and aren't completely jaded, I mean, that really helps. And there's always going to be the jaded folks, and those just aren't the best ones to send to go talk to young people. Um, so yeah, that's a pro tip right there.
And I was going to say too, this is open to anybody, no matter where you are, right? You don't have to be within the vicinity. You can come from California if you wanted to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, we had contractors fly from Washington and Michigan and Connecticut and Florida. They came from all over the country. We had the president of Exactware, so Aaron Brunko. We had, I mean, executives from Belfor, BMS Cat, um, Blue Sky Restoration. I mean, so we had, I mean, and then we have vendors too. So this year we have DocuSketch. We had you guys sponsored our lunches, which was awesome. So thank you.
Very welcome.
And so yeah, just great. It was awesome. Great turnout.
I think you kind of said this without saying it. You said it a little earlier, but this program is a collective effort from everybody in the industry. It's not one track, one person, it's everybody. We can all not only contribute, but also benefit and grow our industry and bring in the younger blood that we need. I think we can all relate and say we see it, right? Some people aren't getting replaced, or you have three, four, five people leave and you get one in their place, right? And that one person is the jack of all trades, I guess you can say. So with this program, we're not only bringing younger, driven individuals. Could somebody older do it? Like, what would be the benefit for them, even if they've already been in the industry for a little bit?
Yeah. So yeah, there's people that have worked in the field and they decide later on that they want to come back to school. We have students here that are working on their second or third career. We have a very strong veteran community that's just they're fantastic and they do a great job going through the program and then also landing great jobs on the other side. So there's people with professional experience, life experience, strong maturity that are coming and studying here. And so I think from an employer standpoint, I think I think we have a lot to offer. So if you think about just the general diversity of our student population it's very strong, very robust. And I think
And
that,
oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know that there's probably a long-term plan as far as like you mentioned it, like getting it to roll out other places. Is that what you see in the next 5 to 10 years? Is that your plan and goal?
Yeah. Yeah. So my plan and goal is to get it launched here. And so as we've talked about the big picture, that's a conversation that's come up in different groups that I've spoken with. And I would be fully supportive of that. But my most immediate goal is to get this launched, and to see this thrive. And the framework that I often refer to is, we have our concrete industry management program here at MTSU. And that program was born from an idea that came from the industry because the concrete industry saw that they didn't have enough people in the pipeline. They needed to educate more young people on what the concrete industry did, and they were just they wanted to do something about it. So they reached out to MTSU, our administrative staff at the time and faculty, and together our concrete program was born. And another perspective or another thing to consider with that is the concrete industry is a strong, robust industry, but it's about half the size of the restoration industry. So when you look at overall revenues that are generated by the concrete industry, it's estimated that the concrete industry is about $110 billion a year industry. Restoration is about twice that size, right? And it depends on catastrophes, and there's large events like that that can cause a huge swing. But even conservative estimates on the size of the restoration industry suggest that it's well over $200 billion a year. So we have an industry that's bigger. We have an industry that's maturing. It is a bit more fragmented, right? And we see that especially with all the mergers and acquisitions and just all the movement. But it is maturing in a way that I think is probably in some ways good for the industry. So as we, and I bring that up because as we've been doing our fundraising efforts, we really, again, this idea was born from the industry, and we want, and really it has to be something that is supported by the industry as well, right? MTSU is committed just under about $4.7 million over the next 5 years in various forms of support to get this program going. What we're asking for the industry in return is right now $1 million to get it going. And then $2 million after that. So the first $1 million will go towards funding a faculty line. And with the $3 million total, the other thing we're sharing with the industry is it will never be less than $3 million. So quite often what happens is when donors give to a college or university in this type of capacity, universities will take what they call F&A, facilities administration.
Yeah.
It can stand for different things depending on the school. But what ends up happening is they take percentage off the top of that, and that percentage could be anywhere between 30 to 60%. MTSU's policy has been, in the past, has been 31.3%. Well, for this initiative, they said that the university is not going to take any overhead off the top of this. So the $3 million will go into an endowed fund. It'll never be less than $3 million, and it'll generate a 4% return every year. The first $1 million to get the faculty line in place, that's really, the main thing we need to get the program started. And that's going to generate $40,000 a year. That $40,000 a year is not going to cover the full faculty salary. So the university is going to cover that difference and then hire someone else to backfill my spot.
Yeah.
But that's how that first $1 million is going to give us the resources we need to dedicate somebody to get this program going. The second fundraising for the $2 million, that's going to go all towards student scholarships, getting students to conferences, getting students into IICRC classes so they can get certified, Xactimate classes so they can get all their certifications, and really providing more opportunities for students and to make sure that they're getting just cutting edge, up-to-date training.
I was going to say, really setting this next generation up for success. In all honesty, we're providing the tools. You kind of led me right into what I was going to ask you next. How can our fellow industry professionals not only contribute, but learn more about this amazing program? And how long is fundraising going on? How much time is left and whatnot?
Yeah. So fundraising is continuous. What I'll do is I'll share a link with you that hopefully we can distribute with this for the giving site, and then also instructions if somebody wants to write a check. Right now we have our two main commitments are from Blue Sky and BMS Cat, and so both of those companies have committed $100,000 over the next 10 years. Our goal and what we're hoping is to have $1 million raised, so like an actual $1 million raised this year. And I think, it's important, I think, to the university that, we have industry buy-in with this and that there's industry support behind it. And right now that's probably the strongest indicator that we have of having that industry support, because the university is ready, willing, and able to commit its resources to launching this program. But that's probably the biggest and most important metric, is just making sure that the industry really does support this. And everything that I've heard from members, whether I've been speaking at conferences or in focus groups or just one-on-ones with contractors, is I haven't heard anyone that's not supportive of this. It's just a matter of getting those resources in place so we can move forward with it.
Yeah, I definitely think this is going to be a collective effort. And, once we get this program up and running, it will allow us to expand as an industry, right? And be able to fill our staff slots with people that are reliable, dependable, and who actually want to be there, right? Like that's the biggest thing. And then we can also maybe avoid some burnout, because I know a lot of people are short staffed. So creating this program is going to make a huge industry shift, a positive one at that. And I think the industry will come together. We always do. And so if there is anything else that you have or want to include, by all means, go ahead and let everybody know.
Yeah, well, I want to thank everyone for the support that we've been receiving. I do get calls from people just wanting to support in different ways. Again, I think the most important way that we can receive support right now is financially, and just making sure we have those resources in place, because yeah, I mean that's our first big milestone that we have ahead of us.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time today, Dr. Jacob Vila. I appreciate it. Until next time, have a good day, everybody.